So Governor Shapiro, 135 days past the deadline. We finally have a state budget. What's your initial reaction to getting that deal done yesterday?
Look, it's a great deal for Pennsylvanians. And look, I worked hard to bring Republicans and Democrats together to meet the needs of our fellow Pennsylvanians. And sure, I would have liked to have gotten it done 100 or so days ago, but here's the reality. All the good stuff wouldn't have been in there. And that's why you stay at the table, you fight for what you believe in, and you work hard in order to deliver. I mean, look, the Philadelphia School District, for example, is going to get about $2 billion in state funding. That's $164 million more than last year because we stayed at the table. I made a pledge to hire 2,000 more police officers across Pennsylvania and fund violence prevention. And we got that done in this budget because we stayed at the table. I made a commitment to cut costs for Pennsylvanians, and as a result of staying at the table, we cut taxes for seniors, for people trying to afford child care, for our small businesses, and a new tax cut for working Pennsylvanians who can get up to $800 now back off their state taxes. We stayed at the table and worked hard. It was frustrating at times. I wish it would have gotten done sooner, but we got it done, and the people of Pennsylvania are better off because of it.
Is that length a problem? You know, we went through this last year. I believe the budget got done in October. And, you know, this year through that time, we talked to daycares who had to take out loans. We talked to school districts who had to take out loans. Some threatened to close. Is that a significant problem that we can't seem to get these budgets done on time?
Yeah, I wish lawmakers would have stayed in Harrisburg to do their job. I mean, you heard me express my frustration about that throughout the summer. I was here shuttling back and forth between the leaders, but the reality is when you send your members home, when you're not here in the building, it's harder to do it. Now, that said, I do need to compliment both leaders, Leader Pittman, Leader Bradford, for staying at the table, working with me, working through these processes, and finding a budget deal ultimately that met the needs of Pennsylvanians. I think, you know, certainly would have been nice to get it done back in June or July, but I don't think we would have gotten all of these wins for the people in Pennsylvania in it had we settled back at that time. Look, I think you just saw in Washington, D.C. what settling and caving looks like. I'm not willing to do that here in Pennsylvania. We're going to stand up and fight for what we believe in.
Governor, you talked in your speech yesterday a lot about compromise. Both sides were going to have to give some. Where did you stand your ground? Where did you win? And what did you really have to give up to get this final product?
I mean, this budget is hundreds of pages of me standing my ground and fighting for schools and safety, economic development, putting money back in people's pockets. There's so many specific examples of that. Workforce development where, pardon me, I'm losing my voice a little bit. Workforce development where we're increasing salaries for those who work in child care centers, increasing salaries for those who are home health care aides. These are things we fought for and we succeeded on. There's also some things we had to compromise on that I'm going to come back and fight for next year. I wanted permanent recurring funding increases for mass transit, and we'll focus here on SEPTA because that's obviously in the Channel 3 area. I wasn't able to get the legislature to adopt that. I'm going to keep fighting for that. I wanted to get a minimum wage passed. We didn't get that done. We're going to keep fighting for it. But these are things that are going to continue to be priorities of mine. And as I said, you know, the day I introduced this budget back in February, the one thing I knew for certain was that this budget would result in all of us having to compromise. We did. I compromised, but I never compromised my values.
I wanted to ask you about pulling Pennsylvania out of RGGI. That seemed to be a priority for many Republican lawmakers. What went into that thought? What does Pennsylvania lose by leaving the greenhouse gas initiative?
Well, the RGGI, or the Greenhouse Gas Initiative, never actually was in effect in Pennsylvania. It's been bottled up in the courts. There's actually been zero impact on our Commonwealth, positively or negatively, really. I agreed to do that in order, frankly, to jumpstart a serious conversation we need to have on energy in Pennsylvania. I've put forth a plan known as the Lightning Plan that increases power generation, reduces the cost for the average consumer, and creates more jobs in the energy sector. And now there's no excuse for inaction anymore. RGGI is gone. We've got to focus on the next steps of doing more when it comes to energy. Bring costs down, generate more, and create more jobs.
Governor, I do want to ask you some things we saw with the end of the government shutdown yesterday. What's that mean for Pennsylvanians, specifically those that rely on SNAP benefits? Do you know how quickly they may see that money come to them?
Those SNAP benefits are rolling out today, so I would expect really over these 24 hours for folks to see their SNAP cards to be fully loaded.
Great. And I wanted to get your thoughts on what we saw, those 8 Democrats siding with the Republican senators to get that through. How did you think that process went? Would you have stood your ground and held out?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to attack any senator individually. They all have to vote their conscience. But what I do not understand is why would you shut down the government, right, as the Republicans did, and then the Democrats say the price of our vote is going to be reducing health care costs for all Americans. And by the way, we have 500,000 Pennsylvanians who are about to see their premiums double, go from an average of $180 a month to an average of $360 a month. You said you were drawing a line in the sand. You said you were at the table to negotiate for lower health care rates, and then you sort of cut and run at the end. I don't know why you do that. I think there's a better way, which is what we did here in Pennsylvania. Stay at the table, fight for what you believe in, and get something. And at the end of the day, deliver for the people that matter most. No one's ever going to get 100% of what they want in this business. You got to compromise, but you can't leave empty-handed, and it seemed like they left empty-handed in D.C.
Governor Shapiro, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Good to be with you.